Well, hello and welcome to the Silent Evil podcast. I'm Spencer Scott Holmes.
I'm Cameron.
And boy, we're oddly going back with two survival horror action games in a row right here. I kind of thought it was like we had Resident Evil 5 last time, and then I was just like, well, there's that release of the GOG putting out the Dino Crisis 2, well, 1 and 2 on the PC versions out there. And I've always wanted to try those out. Plus, I love Dino Crisis 2 so much, and I know Cameron has yet to play it. I thought I was going to savor that one for a bit, but I was like, nope, the timing's perfect. We got to do it. Well, let's check this bad boy out. And it's one of those ones that I really want to hear what your whole experience is. Because Dino Crisis 2, it's very different, but it's extremely awesome all at the same time.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, I very much agree. And same thing, we were talking about it on the original Dino Crisis episode about, how do I get my hands on this thing unless it was like emulated or whatever, just because of the cost of it. And when you hit me up and you sent me that link to GOG, you're like, oh, by the way, surprise release. Like, what? Sweet, cool. Yes, hell yeah, let's do it. So yeah, I was super excited to see that. I mean, to have a bundle pack of those two games on PC for $17 or $18 or whatever it ended up being, very, very cool of GOG to do that. Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, back to pre-rounder backgrounds again.
Yeah. Which let's be honest, I think on a PlayStation that looks better. I get it. Like Dino Crisis 1 and 2 are definitely Capcom's experimental games. I feel like they use those two games to try out a bunch of things and see if it works or if it doesn't. And because a lot of these ones, just like Dino Crisis 1, I feel Dino Crisis 1 was definitely there to experiment with a lot of things to see what would work in Code Veronica. I feel that was almost the test ground for Dino Crisis.
Right.
Where you see Dino Crisis 2 and nobody thinks of it for a while, but like it's really the test ground for Resident Evil 4, 5, and even Devil May Cry.
Yes. Yes.
There's a lot of stuff there where they're like, let's test some things out. We'll play around. Because I think it's that thing. It's like, it's got dinosaurs in it. That's what people will show up because that just sounds too cool. It's still riding off the era of Jurassic Park and The Lost World. And even Jurassic Park 3 is coming out right around, right past Dino Crisis 2. So you could almost get pumped for Jurassic Park 3 by playing some Dino Crisis.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I think just like I said, just that was the number one thing that I noticed right off the bat was just pre-render backgrounds and what that allows for the design of the combat of the game, because the combat is so significantly different, and like I had a somewhat of a semblance of like what the game was supposed to be, just based off screenshots, based off, small amounts of like footage I've seen here and there. And especially during like the research of the original game, when we were playing through that together. So, no, it was super cool to see, like the return of Regina, and all of a sudden you have a brand new character, with Dylan and whatnot. So yeah, I very much really look forward. Hold on one second. Hold on. Oh, 2-year-olds.
I just love because all I could hear is the scream go off in the distance, and it just started to fade out like, ooh.
Yep. Okay. Anyways. But yeah, no. Cool to see like brand new character, with Dylan, and just the core fundamentals between those two characters of, Regina is very much more about, the pistol and having that, electric stun gun type thing. Whereas Dylan very much is just big macho man, starts with shotgun, like shotgun machete, like, oh, I'm going to start slicing down, these doors so I can enter new areas and whatnot. But, I think in general, it's a cool dynamic, yet again, here's another way that Capcom has been able to present, another two character narrative, but this time in the same run, which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah, exactly. So they kind of combined it there too. That's one of those ones that I will say I got kind of a little bit mixed feelings. I don't think that Dylan's like a bad character or anything like that. He's a little bland, but the weird thing is it makes Regina, who's such a cool character, have she's almost the second character of the game. Mm-hmm. She's almost there as like, oh yeah, by the way, Regina is kind of here, but really it's first and foremost a Dylan story, and I feel like you almost play as Dylan, probably just a fraction more than you do
Yeah,
Regina. You
yeah,
know, probably he's 60%, she's 40%, if I had to kind of say, you know. But and once again, it's not a bad thing because they are cool because each one has their own different weapons, sort of slightly different play style and so on like that, and they go to different locations and what have you. But
yeah,
sometimes I do kind of go like, man, it'd be kind of nice to have that, you know, I don't know, maybe even if like you could either do it one of two ways. You could either do it like Resident Evil 1 and 2 style, where like they both have their own campaign and then they sort of
hmm
interact with each other,
hmm
or you know, I'm just trying to think of a ways to have Regina have a
Well,
little bit more screen time.
well, that's more or less what I was expecting. I was expecting you to have a character choice at the start of the game, and from the very first like intro, we have the cutscenes, play and whatnot, and then it like drops you into the game world or whatever. And like Regina just runs off at the start of the game, and it's just like, okay, you're playing as Dylan now. Then it just drops you into the game. I was expecting a character choice at some point, between first cutscene into actually playing the game or whatever. So yeah, so that actually took me by surprise that you do play as both characters throughout the campaign, kind of in an alternate, back and forth sense. So, but again, I think the mechanical side of it they played into pretty well, at least like at the very start with the Regina being able to open up electronic locks, whereas Dylan can open up doors that have vines on them basically because of his machete. It was a cool dynamic. They could have done a lot more with that, I feel.
Yeah.
But
But no, it's just a little thing. But and I think it's going off of Resident Evil 3 because the way that one sort of was. Now, granted, you play as Jill like 80% of the game in there, and Carlos, you just play for like
mhm,
a scene or two. But I feel like they were kind of running with that style with Dino Crisis 2 because that one and Resident Evil 3 kind of go parallel with each other.
right.
I guess technically, really Resident or Dino Crisis 1, but they're so close because I think Dino Crisis is 99 and Dino Crisis 2 is 2000. So it's like a year later,
hmm
They just kind of take it and go, okay, let's do one more hoorah for like the PlayStation 1.
Yeah.
This is kind of the last big of the classic, I guess you would say, survival horror games,
hmm
for PlayStation 1 before going into 2 and, doing Code Veronica on Dreamcast and so on, which is
Yep.
still all the same year, which is kind of interesting to think about.
Right.
It's like survival horror, like overload at this time period where you got Resident Evil 3, you got literally Dino Crisis 2, you got
hmm
Code Veronica. Like they're just coming out.
Yep.
Survivor, the first Gun Survivor comes out the same time too.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So like, I mean, I think the other thing that really took me by surprise, again, not walking into this game, not knowing a whole lot about it, is just the combat model in general. It completely goes from survival horror aspect of the original game where it's kind of slower paced. You're aiming, you're taking your time, with your shots and things like that. Whereas this game, like, because I played it like a survival horror game for the first hour or so, and I'm like, this really, it doesn't work this way. Like, it wants me to shoot, it wants me, and it's giving me 300 rounds of shotgun ammo to go, go perform dinosaur genocide essentially. Like,
I mean, it literally gives you extinction points. They're like,
yeah, you know. So after I changed my mindset and like understood like what the game design, like the core game design was more about, that's where I really started having a lot more fun with it, because I was, like it's all about points. It's all about like just get the max amount of points so you can get the max amount of gear, upgrading your things and all that, like it's kind of like the introductions into I don't know, like you were saying, like some of the later Capcom games and whatnot, I could see the experimentation being played with, with like inventory systems and like how like upgrade paths and buying new weapons and things like that too, instead of like finding them in the world, like being able to go to a vendor, quote unquote. It's basically a computer. It's your save point and it's your upgrade station. Yeah, I found it pretty cool. It was super streamlined, I felt,
yeah,
for probably more of a wider audience, that maybe you have made mention of this topic a handful of times in the last few episodes about like how there was a survival horror burn at one point, where it started to get to be, and I think it was right around this era, it's like the early 2000s, 2001, 2, 3 ish, somewhere around there. like people started getting sick of this style, so I feel that Capcom absolutely went out of their way to go and like create like new versions of it, but in this sense, just like way more action based, which I think was a good thing.
Yeah, and I think it works with the dinosaurs. I think there's a handful of factors. I think Capcom probably kind of saw it coming a little bit, so like, let's test the waters. Once again, Dino Crisis will be an experimental thing. I think the other thing too is probably they realized that, like, you know what? There's some people out there that really enjoy, playing Resident Evil 2 and so on like that, and just having like the unlimited ammo and everything like that, and just going through and still playing the same game, but blasting every single zombie along the way.
Oh yeah.
And I felt like they're like, let's take that and kind of up the ante on it, and that's sort of what we'll do with Dino Crisis 2. And really what it plays out like is it plays out like if Mercenaries was a full-on game. Like if you put a story around Mercenaries and kind of just combine that all together, that's kind of like how Dino Crisis 2 is, where it's like, yeah, the Mercenaries is the game, but we've added the story to it. We have still some of the classic survival horror elements, but not enough that like will ever get anybody too stuck. It kind of has that, like, they're there, so like you have a couple like minor little puzzles, you have a couple things where you got to do a little bit of backtracking, but you never really get. This is not one of those games where you run around for like a half an hour being like, where the hell do I go?
I think that it happened to me once, where I backtracked too far, and once I realized that I went too far or whatever, came back, and that the item or the thing that I needed was in roughly the same area that I was, that happened pretty early on in the game. That trained me throughout the rest of my experience to go like, what's immediately around me first before I start to go crazy backtrack, because you really don't. Yeah, I think there's like 2 instances of like a crazy backtrack in the game, so, but yes, no, I like I said, design wise, I really enjoyed like the streamlinedness of the game, because it does feel like it's just constantly projecting you forward, just constantly go, 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 go. And I think it's replicated in its narrative too, so.
Yeah, well, and that's what just makes it so much fun, is it's that game that, like, I can always go back to, and whenever you play it, you always want to play a couple rounds, because it's not that long. Like, even on, like, your first playthrough, it probably will only take about 5 hours, give or take, and that's, doing pretty much everything. But it has that thing where you play one round, you got to play another round, then you might even play a third round or something like that.
Right.
Like, where, not all the survival horror games, sometimes you beat survival horror games, and you get to that point, you're like, I'm good for a while. And I hate to sort of say it, that's always how Dino Crisis 1 sort of feels. Like, I love Dino Crisis 1, but you kind of beat that one, you're like, yeah, I'm kind of good for a while. Because that game almost has some, like, punishing elements in it where it really makes you think of, like, what you need to backtrack. You got to have 3 keys for, like, almost every door and a code and all kinds of stuff. That one really goes hard into, all those mechanics and so on like that, where this one kind of gives you, like, it gives you all the fun and the same feel, the look. You still have the camera angles, you got the tank controls, you got the pre-rendered background, so it has all the look and feel of a classic survival horror, but just with the action turned up a bit.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. Because I think the other thing that this game has that makes it, replayability wise, like, interesting to want to go back and replay over and over again, is just the amount of locales that you go to, comparatively to the first game, because the first game is just very much just scientific bunker style, where this game has at least like probably 4 or 5 like proper notable, like, here's something new that you hadn't seen in the last 20 minutes, last half hour, last hour, whatever. That's what I really enjoyed about it, and like I said, it's pacing through it, because in my first run, I got a B rank, got 9 out of the 11 dino files at 4.5 hours, so I like missed like 2 things really, like, in that run. But yeah, like I said, just the variety of locales that you go to, I think, is very, very interesting. And they did a really good job in it.
Yeah, no, because you get a lot of variety, everything, and I think once again, having the pre-rendered backgrounds again makes a bigger difference because when you have the full 3D like Dino Crisis 1, and I get they're trying some things out. There's things you can do, like you can have a panning camera and all that kind of
Hmm.
stuff. But it kind of makes everything look a little bit more drab and barren, which once again works for the fact that it's just a research facility and so on. But this one, yeah, it's like you got mixed match of jungles, you got water areas, you got laboratories, you got a town even, and all this stuff, and
Hmm.
it gives me a lot of a feeling like almost like Lost World, Jurassic Park, Site
Hmm.
B area, where you kind of have like, oh, well, here's sort of where a lot more stuff kind of takes place. Here's where there was a town. Here's where there was research facilities. Here where there was
Right.
jungle areas and all kinds of outdoor environments and a mixed match of all that kind of stuff.
Yep. 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 And even like just the very intro part of the game, like you start off in this jungle area and you have that, just the very first cutscene of like, you land down and you're like in this like large field or whatever. All these raptors start attacking and whatnot. And this is like comparatively to the first game, this is like where like the action just like jumps like at you right out the gate. There's Regina and like her entire team are just like firing down on all these raptors and stuff, and then all of a sudden the T-Rex comes out and then dude pulls out a rocket launcher and shoots it in the side of the head, and like everything's exploding and blah, crazy wild, like the way that game starts and whatnot. But I love of that just because you see it right at the very start of the game, but that T-Rex that has the blown out eye from the original rocket kind of like started to see like the remnants of something like the Mr. X or the like the Nemesis, like where you have this like recurrent bad guy that's coming back a few times throughout your entire play experience and whatnot. I thought that was super cool too.
Yeah, no, it has the T-Rex keeps coming around, and he's always got that blown out eye. And then even it has this goes a little bit farther into it, but it reminds me it has some elements kind of like Jurassic Park 3, where there's the T-Rex, of course, but then there's also like an even bigger creature. There's like they have the Spinosaurus, of course, in Jurassic Park, but then they got the Gigantosaurus in Dino Crisis 2, like the even bigger T-Rex mutant thing that comes up, and there's even a T-Rex and that thing fighting each other off at some point and whatnot. So yeah, they definitely up the ante. And the other big one too, I think, is by how many dino varieties there is in this game.
Tons.
Because the
Tons.
first one, realistically, it's like 4 kind of dinosaurs, and then like a couple variant versions of raptors.
Right.
For the most part, you don't have a ton. It's pretty much you're fighting a raptor, you fight T-Rex. There's the little compies. There's Raptor Model 1, and then Raptor souped up, and then there's those like stomping, whatever the stomping dinosaur is towards the end.
Yep.
That's about it. It's kind of like a stomping raptor, practically.
Yeah.
Where this one's got all sorts of, you got copious amount of course, velociraptors. Then you got there's like those Dilophosaurus ones that they're not exactly, they're like an Omniraptor or something, but they kind of act like a Dilophosaurus out of Jurassic Park. Of course, you got the pterodons, you got the water dinosaurs, and there's the ones in the volcano, and there's so many different variations that you get a battle through.
And they're all different too. They all do different things. That's the interesting part about it. So like, though this game has a hell of a lot more weapons and again like just variety in general, like this game just has a ton more. But even with like because at a certain point, like I just fell into like I just upgraded the shotgun to just have more ammo. Like I didn't buy a ton of weapons throughout the first portion of my experience. It was really like later where I really started unlocking more weapons because I felt like I needed them, because the difficulty started ranking up. But like using that shotgun at the start of the game, it's like, cool, I can take out a velociraptor in one shot, but a little while later, it takes 2 shots, 3 shots, 4 shots or whatever. So like by the time you're starting to get into that like swing of things or whatever, when I first saw that the game gives you 100 rounds of shotgun, I was like, why? Like why? And then I started playing it, and then it's like you're moving screen to screen to screen because it's all pre-rendered background static cam or whatever, but you're moving screen to screen and the game's just spawning monster after monster after monster after monster. And next thing you know is like you just have these huge packs of monsters chasing you around. So it's like, now I understand why I have 100 rounds, bam, 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 and just watch your score tick up, and like, oh, I love it. I love it. It was so much fun, It's ridiculous, in the sense of like, I'm playing a survival horror game with these characters that I know and whatnot, like in this new environment. it's a bit ridiculous, but the fun factor, like I wasn't taking the game seriously like throughout my entire playthrough. It was just fun, you know.
Yeah,
And
the fun level's so high.
mm-hmm. And I see that recurring again, you know, like we talked about on the last episode, Resident Evil 8. I very much feel the same exact way about that game, where it's like it's pretty ridiculous. It doesn't really fall into Resident Evil, but it's just blatant fun. It's just a fun game, you know. And like I think Capcom just like is just a master at just making fun things, you know, for the most part. So they really nailed it here.
Yeah, no, exactly. And like literally it has that interesting respawn thing that like the camera angles, when you switch angles, new enemies come out. So it always reminds me like an NES game. Like all you have to do is shift a little bit and then all of a sudden you just respawn a bunch of, you know, enemies from the same area again. And, and that's kind of almost a way you can kind of manipulate some combos where like you just kind of step forward, step backwards, shoot, 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 step forward, step backwards, shoot, shoot, shoot. And then mostly after about 2 or 3 times of doing that, the game goes, okay, we see what you're doing. And they like kind of put an end to that. And then you got to kind of switch up the camera angles again and go to a new area. But and how those like extinction points really ride is that what you really want, the combos are important, but what you really want is you want to get a handful of those combos in there, but then don't get hit whatsoever. Because once you get like the no damage bonus with just even like you'd be better off having a lighter amount of combos, but just getting that no damage bonus. That's how you really rack up those points.
Oh yeah. Between that and then I'm pretty sure there's like an all clear screen too, where you can just like clear like all the monsters that are in that particular zone too. That's a multiplier. So like having these different styles again, like I wasn't thinking of it as I was playing the game. It wasn't until very much later where I was just like, this is it's fucking Devil May Cry. You know, like this is exactly what the system is, you know. Which again, you know, just like the legacy thing of like what Dino Crisis has done, you know, just as the testing ground. It's the playground, you know, for all these other titles that I love so much, you know. So it's cool to see the origin points of them. So yeah,
they all totally build up here. Except for this one's not nearly as punishing as Devil May Cry. It's not like one of those ones like, oh, you want a health pack? Well, guess what? It's gonna be more expensive the next time you want one.
Yep.
You know, well, this game just lets you just be like, you want more ammo? Cool. Nothing changes. You want more health packs? By all means. You need some more money? Go kill some more dinosaurs.
Yep, exactly. I died once, maybe twice, but both were like they were very much. Both were in that tank scene, like where you jump in the tank.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, it was funny because when I was playing that tank scene again, I was like, I did the thing where I was trying to run away from the T-Rex the first time, and I just like barely made it. And then on my second round playing it, I'm just like, I'm just gonna turn the tank around and just blast this thing. I was like, oh, you could kill the T-Rex about halfway through. I did not realize that.
Yep.
I thought you had to sort of run away and you just use the tank to blow through the barrels. And I was like, oh no, you can actually kill that T-Rex, and then once again you get points for it.
Right. Exactly. I mean, he
doesn't totally die, but he just stops for a moment. He falls over and then gets back up later.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's the same thing like with the so again, like enemy variety wise, you know, like you have your raptors, you have your like little spitter, you know, style ones that kind of ram you with their heads and whatnot. You got compies, you got, you know, like there's a bunch of different styles of these things, but the ones that really took me by surprise that I really didn't know for a long time if you could actually kill them or not were the slightly larger velociraptors, like the allosaurs, you know. It's like a little bit smaller than a T-Rex, but quite a bit bigger than. You know, anyways, yeah, those things. Like, I spent a good while, you know, with the, you know, just like shotgun at the start of the game, just like bam, 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 you know, and like I would hit it like 10 times, 12 times, 15 times, and it's like I'm gaining points every time I hit it, but like it's not dying, you know. And then eventually, like a little while later, when I finally unlocked like the big laser ball, you know, lightning gun fucking thing, you know, like then I was like, okay, you can actually kill these things. Cool.
You know, I actually did kill it with I believe I killed it with the pistol for Gina on one of my plays because I wanted to see. I was like, I just want to see if I could kill it with this. And what I use the flame like secondary like wall. So I'd throw that flame wall out and it would get the Allosaurus kind of caught in it, and then you'd run around and go bang, 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 shoot it in the side or the back. Because you find a dino file that explains that you're not supposed to shoot it head on. You don't find it right off the bat, but you find it a little bit later and it's like, oh, okay, you know. And then I realized you can kill it. For the most part, it's not really worth doing
Yeah.
that, especially early on in the game. You're just wasting your time and health and all that stuff. It's best just to run by it. Once you get like the anti-tank rifle, it doesn't matter. You just blast the living daylights out of that thing.
That's my favorite gun in the entire game. Just the noises that it makes, just because it is just such a singular, just like singular shell shot, just and especially with like the little spitters, that run around and ram you and whatnot. Like,
Yeah, just like
I loved shooting those things with, yeah, great weapons, great guns.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that they give you all sorts of good weapons, and they give you a copious amount of them. Then they give you kind of cool secondary weapons too, because you start off you got the machete and then the stun gun, which other than opening doors, like, I don't use it too often. You can if you run out of ammo, of course it does kind of work. You can kind of manipulate it like into other kind of combos, like you shoot a raptor down, then you go up and you could hack him a couple times, like literally once again Resident Evil 4 style.
Right.
Right. You could do that, but sometimes even on if you play it on hard, you kind of can, because you have less ammo, but at the same time it's almost not really worth it. Like on hard, you're better off just running away for the beginning part and getting to like areas that are a little bit safer, then building up your money and then doing that, or else you just you can get killed pretty fast on that hard mode.
Oh yeah. See, I never. So I started the game on easy just to try it, originally, and like within the first 10 minutes, I just recognized, I was like, I'm just gonna walk through this game. It's not even gonna be a challenge, Kind of felt the same way about normal. Like normal definitely had its moments where like I was healing throughout the game and whatnot, but yeah, hard mode, I'd be curious to actually do a hard mode run and just kind of see like what enemies have more health, you have less ammo, is it that simple, or is there like any other core differences between it?
There's no core difference. It is definitely way more difficult, because the interesting thing too, I'll say, is that easy mode, because I remember when I started the game, I'm like, well, there's 3 difficulties. I'm like, I don't remember that on PlayStation. And then like I just wanted to see what the easy mode was, and I was like, oh, this one's like way too, so I backed out of that real quick. I was like, you get almost way too much. I'm like, I think on PlayStation it's normal and hard. I don't think there is an easy mode on there. And as I said, yeah, the normal mode's pretty much almost good enough. I don't even know why they really have like that easy mode. Is like feels like that's almost like made if you were like 8 years old or something like that.
Right.
It's one of those ones where it's almost as I said, like on normal, you pretty much could get away. Even if you died a couple of times, it's not like it's the end of the world in that game. So they give you the resurrection packs and all that kind of stuff. I will say, when you do play hard though, it jumps a big. It's like a huge jump though. Like, so
that's where I was curious, because like the health system in this game really doesn't make sense to me. Like to have hemostats and to have large, medium and small health packs and whatnot. Really, like as long as you have large health packs, like once you unlock those, or like are able to buy those consistently or whatever, they're really not that expensive, and they fix they fix bleeds and they heal you at the same time to a full health bar. Like in the way that the menu works, of like being able to hold two stacks at a time, and you just fill your inventory with those, with two resuscitation packs or whatever, you're golden, like you're good for like the rest of the game. Like there's no reason to do anything else, So I'm actually I was curious like why that health system actually existed, other than maybe if you spend more money on items like the armors and stuff, like the special item, style stuff, because those are like very high dollar, amounts. So that's the only thing I could really think, is that like maybe you can only afford the small health pack because you bought the armor in a certain extent. But again, just go grind, like
it's not like it's money's in a sense kind of unlimited if you really want it to. The weird thing is though, is I noticed this kind of issue is because if you buy the special armor, there's like one special armor that gives you it makes you so you don't bleed anymore. Well, if you buy that and you still have some of those hemostats left, well, guess what? Those things are going to stay in your inventory till the end. You can't get rid of them. You just
can't get rid of them. Damn.
No. It's like, and I remember I had, just because that game, I don't think I ever really bought health in that game, because you mostly always find it for the most part too, so it just stacks. But I remember it's just like, oh nice, now I just got these hemostats here that just gonna be taking up space till the end,
right yeah.
One of those weird things there. But it even gets to the point though where a lot of times just like, oh, there's health on the ground, guess what, your inventory's full, whatever, But the other weird thing too is like, once again, you say about the variety of health is because they got small, medium, and large. And now, granted, the large also heals the bleeding, but the small practically heals you up the entire way.
Exactly.
Anyways, it's like
not like, it's like 75% of your health gets fixed by a small heal, and it's like, why?
Yeah, and I can't remember because it's been a moment since I played it on hard because I just played it on normal this time around because but I did play it before on PlayStation back in the day. So maybe small packs do. Maybe they only heal like 25% in hard. I can't remember it off the top of my head, but that could be where it was designed for initially. Was for all the hard modes, and that would make kind of a little bit more sense.
It very much feels like it because, like I said, I mean, like I rarely felt like I was in trouble in that game. Like, and the fact that maybe something else that might have assisted with the, I don't know. Like if you had an inventory style to where, think of it like Dead Space or something of that nature, where it's like, a contextual menu that pops up that you have to like navigate through, but the game's still happening, like maybe if it had something like that, like maybe it would have been a little more like even more difficult, I guess, because right now, again, it's like when you have an inventory full of health items anyways, you have a feature where you can just hit pause, the game stops, you heal. Like I don't know. It could have been done better in my opinion, but at the same time, like I don't feel like it really even needed that in depth of a health system to begin with. I think it was just a legacy thing that came forward from the other games. So like, why even have it? Why not just scrap it?
Yeah,
so.
You almost could you really could have just a med pack, a resurrection pack, and the hemostats. Just to give it that. That's all you just throw out the small and medium ones. So those ones are kind of just. I mean, yeah, they're there, but yeah, it is kind of strange. As I said, probably doing a run on hard would probably change that up a little bit because on hard, like literally, like 3 attacks from a Velociraptor can pretty much kill you on hard.
Oh yeah.
So it's not like where you can kind of almost get attacked 3 times and your health only goes like maybe halfway down on normal.
Yeah, right.
You just keep carrying on, So yeah, there is a little bit that there, but even still, it's just like you're mostly having it's just like still a right balance of like, you're having fun, still got just enough difficulty in there to give you just a little bit of trouble, but nothing too much that's ever going to stop your progress. Or like one of those ones where you keep running into a room, you're like, I die every single time I get in here. What the hell?
Yep. No, I'd say more so than anything, like the resource management side of the game is it's ammo, like for sure. Like that was probably the one thing like I kept running out of, more so than health was ammo, and I think that's just like a testament to how the game was designed. It wants you to be aggressive, it wants you to be combative, and just like again, just constantly moving forward, constantly pushing. And just to get the highest score you can, so you can get the better things, so you can get the bigger scores, so you can get the better things. It's that gameplay loop, just yeah. So I think it was very well done, very well done.
Yeah, and this is another weird thing I did notice in the PC version is generally when you beat this game, I remember like you could literally do like a new game plus, and now you didn't keep your items, but I remember I could have swore on the PlayStation version you kept all your like extinction points, but I noticed on the GOG one or on the PC version that even if I continued like the new game plus, it still saved, like it was like I played it my second and third time, but I was my extinction points were back to 0 again. And I was like, what?
Really? That's interesting.
Yeah, so
I never went in for a second run, so that's interesting.
Yeah, well, because like when you played the second run, I almost want to say you unlocked a couple other like items that you could buy and so on like that, and eventually you could buy like the unlimited ammo and so on like that, so that you could literally just rake up those points and so on. But I want to say unlimited ammo is like 1 million extinction points or something crazy. Yeah. So you'd have to play it over like multiple times for that, but yeah, it would almost be kind of cool if you just kept all your items, so that it would make the speed runs in this game just like really cool. Because just think about you start off the anti-tank rifle right off the bat, blast your way through. I do want to say in the PlayStation one though, once again, you kept the extinction points, but right when you hit the first save point, it had all the weapons were already there, so you could just buy the ones right off there. But for some reason, I noticed at least in the PC one, I almost have to go back and try, like. That it was just giving me like almost like I was starting a new file no matter what. It was kind of weird. The extinction points carried over for the Dino Coliseum and all that kind of stuff, but not anything else. So
yeah. No, I'll have to go and look myself. Like I said, I haven't even decided to start a second run yet of the game, but. What I would like to talk about is the very first time I booted the game, because like, that was an interesting experience. So. I have a PS5 controller that I use for most things on my PC. I link it via Bluetooth to my Bluetooth device that's in my PC. And for the most part, GOG recognizes controllers just right off the get-go, regardless if you're plugging in USB, if you're plugging in, or linking up through Bluetooth. This game right off the get-go wasn't working, and I couldn't quite tell why. So launched the game, turn the controller on after games launched, wouldn't work. So I was like, okay, I'll try it in reverse order. Turn on the controller first, and then I launched the game. And this very, very funny thing happened where because I didn't have Steam launched. So when I turned on my controller, it launched Steam, but it launched Steam in the big picture mode, which coincided with me clicking on the play button for Dino Crisis, because I turned the controller on first, then want to start the program. So I click on Dino Crisis. I'm thinking that the game program's loading up because my screen goes black, and then all of a sudden I'm just looking at the big picture mode in Steam, and I'm like, what the fuck just happened? Because the last action I told my computer to do was to launch Dino Crisis 2, and all of a sudden I'm looking at, Steam. Has nothing to do with the game whatsoever. I just thought it was a really funny story. But but it did take me a while to get the GOG version to recognize my controller and actually start operating with it. I had to really, what my fix was disabling my Bluetooth module on my computer and then restarting that whole chip or whatever. Once that happened, then GOG started reading it again. So I don't know if it's a problem with the game or if it's a problem with GOG, but I did have slight issues with Bluetooth connection via PS5 controller through GOG on this title.
Yeah, that's interesting because I was using my Xbox Series X controller on it. Same method though, through Bluetooth or anything like that. The only issue I would ever notice is sometimes if I didn't turn the controller on before I turned the game on, it might get kind of a little bit jacked up, and then it's thinking you're using the keyboard. But
the first hour that I logged into the game, and I was actually kind of happy that it worked out that way because I did get to play it with mouse and keyboard. Granted, just keyboard because this game doesn't have mouse control.
You play with mouse,
but it actually works really well. I was really surprised, even in its default settings. Like I did some key mods and whatnot, to like change the key configurations around just so it was more comfortable for me. But even in its default settings, like it works really well on mouse and keyboard. And I think it's, again, one being tank control, two being static cam and pre-rider backgrounds. I think was really cool.
Well, and I think the keys itself are like for tank controls are like perfect because you can't jack it up in a sense. You're always getting kind of perfect inputs where like on a D-pad or something like that, there's a slight little bit of variation from like the diagonal and all that stuff that can kind of throw it off. But like the keys are perfect. It's kind of the same way with like fighting games. Like if you use like literally the arrow keys, it's like you never miss like with your attacks.
Right.
And if you miss, it's because you messed up. There's no like, I didn't roll the controller right. No, because it's all button inputs.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Oh, that was the other thing that was funky going on upon first launch. So when I started getting the controller to work, using D-pad was totally fine, but my analog stick, and I think it was because it was linked to Windows in some sense or whatever, because my analog stick was changing my volume nonstop. So as I'm pushing up on my thumbstick, it's increasing the game's volume, and when I'm pushing down, it's decreasing. And I'm like, what the fuck's going on? So, anyways, point being, I had to play with keyboard for about an hour of the 4.5 hours that I played the game, and it was totally fine. Way more comfy on a controller, of course, But the other thing that I'd like to say about the GOG version is, I wonder how easily moddable this game is going to be just because of the pre-render backgrounds. Because again, it's the same thing that we talked about with Resident Evil 5, where it's like environment's kind of low poly, low texture, but character models are super high quality or whatever. And it's hard to look at, in some sense. And really in this game, everything looks like a PS1 game, don't get me wrong, in terms of its polygon count and whatnot, but like character models are just so high res, compared to, monster models are so high res comparatively to the rest of the world or whatever, that it just makes everything look kind of muddy,
Yeah, I mean that is what I do like about the PC versions of pretty much any of these older games anyways, is because you kind of get it. You're like, oh, like they're so much clearer looking because they pretty much have about 2 to 3 times more of the resolution, and just that in itself makes the biggest difference. Granted, I remember being able to do that like on like my PlayStation like emulators back in the day, because I remember playing through Dino Crisis once and I had it cranked up to 1080 and everything like that on there.
Yeah.
And I had a friend that came over and he goes, "Dude, that version looks so much better than mine." It's like, yeah, it's really just the same game. It's just you make that resolution go up, and it's amazing. Just that factor in itself clears so much up.
I wish that the only thing that I would wish that GOG, or if Capcom, would have had this in the original PC release of the game or whatever, is just a CRT filter. Like if one of the two, if GOG would do it, or if the original game had it, I think it would help with that quite a bit,
Yeah.
And that's where I'm like really curious to see like what's the mod potential of this. Can you get in and like get the higher resolution backgrounds to where it more matches the 3D polygonal models, of like how sharp everything looks or whatever, because again, right now it's like looking at like a 480p image versus like a 4K model, like stacked on top of each other. It's hard, like depth perception wise. I kept missing ladders a lot in this game, just because of like the way that my brain was processing the 3D character model versus the 2D environment or whatever. It was hard to judge like exactly like where certain things were in terms, again, mostly ladders. Like I kept missing ladders,
No, I could see where that kind of happens, especially when it is kind of cranked up a bunch.
Yep.
And see, these are those things I always wonder, because I know this was an issue with the Final Fantasy games, is that they didn't keep the original files for their pre-rendered stuff because that just took up too much data. So I always kind of assume if Square wasn't doing that, how many other companies probably, that was just common thing. It's just like, yep, okay, we got the pre-rendered stuff, the game's out, whatever, delete the old files. Because that's the biggest thing. It's like, yeah, so you can make the polygons look excellent. Polygons can always go up in resolution, but when it's just a static image, that was saved to be at 320 p, like, how do you get that thing up? Yeah, there's some of that stuff there. Well, and then you even mentioned the CRT filter. That almost needs to be a GOG feature, realistically.
That's what I'm thinking.
You would have, if you had this game back in the day, you most likely were playing it on a CRT monitor already. It's 2000, so if you might have had one of those like flat screen, like when those XP monitors were kind of coming out, which I still have one of those. Those things are always good looking ones because they kind of have like the best of both worlds. You get sort of the mixture of like CRT, and it's sort of got like a perfectly flat screen, full screen, and like resolution. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, and I mean, if GOG were to have just that as default, like, or not even as default, just as a toggleable feature, within its own platform for any one of these games that you can buy and play, I think it would be super cool. And again, like I'm at that point, I'm just, I'm nitpicking, like just to have a complaint, I guess. But it's not a big deal. That goes away, in my mind, like as I was playing it, more and more and more. That starkness went away. It was the same thing in Resident Evil 5 when we played that a few weeks ago, like I noticed it very heavily at the start of the game, like, damn, this is really funky looking. But, like as you progress through, I mean, that all goes away. So that's pretty much all I really had to say about like the GOG version of the game. I would be interested to understand a little bit more of like, what is the difference between the PS1 version versus the PC version, if there are much of any, So like you said, I think difficulty is probably one of them, and then I don't know what else would be different, because like once you beat the game, you basically unlock that like mercenaries mode more or less, and then past that, like is there anything else really in the game, or is that just kind of it?
No, that's kind of it, because there's just kind of the new game plus type stuff, so you get a little bit of that there. There's the Dino Coliseum. Or there's the Dino Coliseum, which is pretty much just a light version of, it's like Mercenaries, but Metal Gear Solid VR mission style. Like that's what it looks like. And then there's a third mode that kind of comes along with it that's called like the Dino Battle mode. So it's a 2-player mode that you can actually play where you just both play as a dinosaur and fight each other.
Oh, okay.
So it's kind of cool, very novel, but it's there. But all that stuff's generally in the PlayStation. The only thing that I noticed that was different mainly was that extra difficulty of the easy mode being in there, because I know for a fact that easy mode was not in in the original PlayStation 1, because that was like ridiculously easy. And then the fact that I could have swore the extinction points rolled over like in the PlayStation version. And that might just be like a glitch on, I don't know. I kind of wonder if that was just a PC glitch going on or something, but like I just noticed that wasn't happening.
The thing that I noticed, because so whatever points I had at the end of the game, like I was able to spend them on like characters. So like I bought Gale, for the mercenaries mode or whatever. I bought the tank for the mercenaries mode or whatever. But in terms of like, I don't know, like I said, I'll just need to start another run and just see, like what happens with those points outside of that. But in terms of that run specifically, it's like, yes, you can go unlock things with those points, at the end of the game, that seemingly apply to this, Dino Coliseum mode, type thing.
Yeah, well, because it kind of does make sense because you literally get points for like killing the final boss. You're like, well, where the hell am I going to use those at? Like the first time, you know what I mean? Like, cool, I got a bunch of points, and then it's like the game's over. You know what I mean?
Right.
But like,
exactly.
so they do like all your extra points do go towards that. But for some reason, I thought they went towards other things.
Yeah.
But I will say this is not Dino Crisis 2, but in Dino Crisis 1 on the PC version, they do have some stuff like they have the arrange mode, which actually makes it kind of different. Which let's be honest, I don't want an arrange mode on Dino Crisis. Dino Crisis is already, it's already a game that's kind of a little bit tedious in finding certain things. Like, don't give me where you're gonna switch all those items around. There's certain games that can kind of work for, but Dino Crisis is like, ooh, that might be just asking for punishment, like
totally.
Everything you remember, forget about it, Like they have one that's on Resident Evil 2 on the N64 version, which I keep thinking that like they need to put, since Nintendo has that mature rated section for their virtual console, like they should put, that's the perfect place to put Resident Evil 2 on the 64 one. Because that one in itself just has a bunch of stuff that's not in any of the other versions. Like you can change the blood color. You can even change the gore if you want. You can, it's got an extra Chris file in there. And then it literally has a random arrange mode. So the game is always different every single time, which that's kind of novel in a sense, just for you like, hey, here you go. The items are going to be randomly placed. It's not just like, oh, they're in different locations. Like, no, they're always going to be in different locations.
Right. Yeah, I was, speaking of the Resident Evil 2 N64 version, like I brought that to Matt's attention and then we both started looking into it pretty heavily or whatever. And it's another one that's like, it's pretty rare, it's pretty expensive, or whatever. But the fact that Capcom was able to fit Resident Evil 2 on a 64 cartridge and like made it work, like, oh my god, like how, there must be so much crap cut out, like or at least like hyper compressed, like to a point. I can't imagine the audio in that game's very good, or that version.
Well, it's one of those ones. It's like, it's not bad, like, I mean, if you're playing it on a CRT TV, you're not going to notice. I'll tell you that. Like, it's one of those ones. And I know that like on that game, they only cut like one cutscene just out, just one, and it's like one small part where they just, instead they're like, it wasn't really that necessary, but they have literally all the cutscenes are in there pretty much. Generally, just about all the dialogue, all the music.
Crazy.
Like that. It's such a, and the fact that it's like, it's not just as a 1-disc game, it's a 2-disc game. So talk about like a double struggle. Like they probably would have just been easier to put, like director's cut on there or something like that.
Right,
like,
right. Exactly.
Resident Evil 3 even, but the fact that they went with 2, but it's a very cool version though. It's one of those ones that would also be another one because they keep having these really cool N64 re-releases of games coming out where like either they kind of like remaster them like the Project Night Dive or Night Dive Studios always does for like, they did Turok and they did well, it's not N64, but they did Dark Forces and all that kind of stuff. But it would be cool to see something like that. Or there's those other ones. Now, granted, since it's pre-rendered, it's a little bit different. But there's that other thing where they have these like N64 games running on PC hardware. So like they have like Star Fox and like Ocarina of Time and all kinds of stuff. But when they run on PC, it's like the polygon count just is ridiculous and they're crystal clear. And I've tried the Star Fox and the Majora's Mask one out, and it's like mind-blowingly good.
Right.
But it'd be cool to see somebody do something with that with Resident Evil 2, but I'd even take it on the virtual console just because, once again, it's a very cool version. Like, it might not be, like, at the end of the day, I always thought, like, the GameCube version of Resident Evil 2 was probably the superior one of all of them. But the N64 one, if you could take just a little, like, minor step back and, like, maybe, like, graphic resolution, like, it actually offers a lot more than the other ones do.
Sure. Yeah, no, I think it'd be super, like, it'd just be cool just to have, like, I
Yeah.
mean, like yeah, those style versions of those games. So you just made me think of this. So Dino Crisis 1 has a Dreamcast port. Does DC2, or is it only PS1 and PC?
It's only PS1 and PC, and for some reason, I was reading up on stuff. They've thought about putting it on PS2, and I have no idea what that means because there's no they didn't really just port PlayStation 1 games to PS2.
Right.
Like I can't even think, like, we just mentioned Resident Evil 2, and of course they ported Resident Evil 2 and 3 to GameCube, and granted they are in their kind of original, give or take PS2 slash or PS1 slash PC versions, but they're just like at the highest resolution you can kind of get at the time, and that's why
Right.
they run real smooth. But yeah, it's weird that Dino Crisis 2, I think, as it falls on that, like, literally it's the same year that the PS2 comes out. Because I think it came out in what, like May or something like that.
Something like that. Yeah.
And then of course PS2, or no, it came out in September.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it literally
Interesting.
came out like, a month or two before PS2 comes out in the US.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, interesting. But yeah, and I think kind of like a lot of like what I was excited to talk about with this game on is all of its set pieces. Like from the very get-go, like when you first, like, the Allosaurus, like that introduction of that creature or whatever, for that matter, the introduction of any one creature is done very well in the game, because it has like foreshadowing with the dino files if you're able to find them, ahead of time or whatever, and like you mentioning, especially like Allosaurus, like, don't attack it head on. I don't remember seeing that. I have the dino file for it. Maybe I just missed that line or something like that. But yeah, maybe comment on that a little bit more, of like how you feel about the way that monsters are introduced.
Well, they're all kind of cool because it's like they'll give you like a cool little cut scene that kind of builds into these dinosaurs. But a lot of times, they'll have the dino file that will kind of break down, not only tell you about the dinosaur itself, give you a little bit of history lesson and so on there, tell you kind of how these dinosaurs have been interacting with this, island and so on like that, and to the people and whatnot. And then it kind of will give you some tactics sometimes of like how to like deal with them, which I think is kind of interesting. Like every single one of them generally says, like, like the Velociraptor that says, like, whatever you do, don't run away, because then that's going to make you want to chase them and so on. And the Allosaurus, it talks about their heads just really thick, so they're hard to kill there. It talks about with the compies that, like, oh, they like to steal shiny items and so on like that. Which that's kind of like the classic little, like, struggle part is where that compy takes your key card and you have to go chasing around there. And even the first time I kind of forgot exactly how you're supposed to do that kind of, in a sense, puzzle. That probably is the biggest puzzle of the game in a way, is leading that compy back inside the room and then got to put him in the cage. And once you kind of figure out, it's like, oh, you got to close all three of those little shutters so that he's trapped in there. And then it's not too bad to get him inside.
Yeah, that was probably, out of puzzle complexity, if you can even grade that on a scale in this game, like, that's probably the one that was like, it took me a little bit to go, oh, I'm just supposed to touch these stupid doors and block him from going back into that room. Okay. So, but yeah, no, I love that. I think probably my favorite set piece in the entire game was where you go underwater. It's so a little while into the game, so you start off on like this jungle, style island or whatever, and then you're tasked to go to the Third Energy, research center or blah blah blah, and you make your way out there or whatever. And there's a good handful of puzzles to be able to get to this point, but eventually you get this diving suit and you find this whole underwater section or whatever. And for how bad water sections are in majority of games, for me to actually enjoy this portion of the game, like, it's probably one of my favorite portions of the game, to be honest. Like, I loved it, this, because I think it really, because it slowed the game down, to more of like a survival horror like style, where you're trudging along in this like really heavy suit underwater or whatever, and with the static camera angles and everything like that, like you hear monsters off in the distance, you have no idea what they are or where they're coming from or whatever, and then bam, it's just like these like alligator style, like underwater creatures and stuff, and like, the weapons that you get for the underwater section are so cool. They're so much fun, you know. Like
Yeah, you get the little pistol, the underwater pistol thing, and then you get like the rockets.
yeah, you get like the big Mega Man fucking arm just. It's like shoot, and then like the underwater grenade launcher, and just like I don't know, that whole section was just so cool. Like I really liked it.
Yeah, and it looks good, and that part definitely delivers quite a bit of like the survival horrorness, because the game still is scary. Like that's the one. It's like
Sure.
even though there's a copious amount of the dinosaurs, you will jump multiple times in this game for sure. It is not unheard of in that. And that underwater section will get you there. Like I got pretty good at it. Where like on my second round, I only got hit by one of those guys.
No,
I
really?
was like, I was so good. I was like, oh man, I got them all. Like what I mean, step forward, aim, bam, bam, bam. There we go, got him. Step forward, aim. And then one of them got me just from a corner shot, because that's sometimes what gets you in that game. Is sometimes they get that, but no, that part's pretty cool. I used to think of that part being like the part of the game that sort of, in a sense, kind of slowed it down a bit too much, but it's really not that long. I timed it. Literally on my second playthrough, I looked at the clock and I was all, it took me maybe 22 minutes to go through that whole thing.
Yeah.
Now, granted, if you probably played it for the first time, it might take about 35 minutes or so, but it's not ridiculously long, and you get a cool little boss battle in there and everything like that. There's some weird platforming parts in there that sometimes take a moment to get kind of used to. But
well, and that's what took me the longest piece, is that at the end of it, after you blow up the platform and you got to climb up there and all that or whatever, like I just missed the plug. I missed that item up there. I saw it earlier, like when you first enter that room, way early on. I saw it up there, but a little while later when I was up, like actually up there, like I just missed it, and I like couldn't figure out what to do. But yeah, no, like I said, I mean that easily I think was probably my favorite section of the whole game.
No, it's cool. It looks cool. Yeah, no, I actually came around and appreciate it more, because when I'm remembering it, I remember it being kind of like I would have called it like the lull of the game, but I don't think so. I actually think it is kind of neat in playing through it some more. It is weird how Dino Crisis does do that stuff. It'll send you on like a mission, and you only pick up one item. And like in other survival horror games, you feel like this must not be enough. I feel like I needed. I went through a half an hour. I feel like I should have something else here, but it's like no, that's all you needed.
Oh, speaking of too, so there's we kind of touched on it a little earlier, about the backtracking side of things, and you and I were texting during this when I got to this point in the game. But when you make it to the third energy island, and it's like you find this door that you need an employee key card for or whatever, and like you find some files around there that's basically like, oh, the dude's like, oh well, I left my key card back in the river, back in the jungle island, and blah blah blah. So you have to go all the way back just to go get the stupid key card to literally just come right back to open up that door. Like, and nothing happens in between. Like, you literally just go back to get the key card and back, and it's like, again, for how streamlined they're trying to make the game, like, why? Like, why did you put this in here?
They like that. I felt like they wanted to just throw somebody a curveball, be like, oh yeah, by the way. But it was that one on my first playthrough. I remember that part, and then I was looking for that key card, and I'm like, man, I can't find that key card. I was looking next to that waterfall and everything like that. I'm like, I thought it was sitting right here. I thought I could have swore you could pick that up, and so I didn't get it. Found that memo, went back and got it, and was like, oh. It's one screen off from because I think it flows. I think like at some point in the game it's by the waterfall, but then it flows off to the other side. On my second playthrough, I picked the key card up right when I went through that area.
So you can. So
it does. So you can really like streamline that process there. I mean, once again, the upside of Dino Crisis 2, it's not the worst thing in the world. It's like, you get a little bit more extinction points. You got to go back, kill some dinosaurs. If this game didn't have the extinction points, that would be a pain in the ass. If it was like, gotta run through this area again, and they gotta hopefully survive. Yeah, it would be that kind of moment.
Well, especially like where that key card's located, because it's really only like, I think it's like 3 or 4 screens. The set areas, like into the jungle. So it like Spence said, like it really doesn't take very much time at all. Like for you to get from the energy island back to the jungle, grab that stupid key card, and come back, it's like 4 to 5 minutes.
I would say like 5 minutes maximum. Probably like, if you just bolt, you can get it really quick.
Yeah. So there was that one, and then I'm failing to remember what the other backtrack is, but it's roughly the same idea that happens kind of immediately afterwards, where you go back.
Is it for the gas mask when you get that?
No. That is one.
Because pretty much the jungle's the only area where there's probably about 3 or 4 little slightly backtrack things.
Yeah, I can't remember. I can't recall what it was. I remember because I remember I identified it like directly after. It happens right after you get that key card. There's another like door or something that you need to get into that the game forces you to go back to a previous area to grab a key item so you can open it. It happens back to back. I don't remember exactly what it was off the top of my head, but next episode I'll remember.
Yeah, you remember that. The upside is, I want to say, when you get that key card from the dude that dropped it in the waterfall or whatever, is that's my favorite area for getting the extinction points, is because you have those like those water brachiosaurus things that pop out, and if you have, especially if you have Regina's double machine guns, like you just go in there and just go bop, 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 just blast these creatures as they, and like it's one of those ones where I always kind of wonder, because I've always had the double machine guns at that part. I always kind of wondered, like, if you only had like the pistol or something like that, can they probably can get you if you stand there, but
sure.
like most of the time it's just you're sitting there just blasting them, and it's supposed to. I feel like it was supposed to be scary, but like it's just because you're so overpowered to these creatures that you just rack up these like 13-point combos or whatnot. Then every single door you go through, you literally get like the ultra bonus for not getting hurt, and you can do it about 2 or 3 times on each one of those areas. And I think there's about 3 areas that has them there. That is always the area where I just seem to build up the most amount of points.
Yeah, you just go and farm.
Yeah, like I mean, granted, there's areas of velociraptors where you can build up a much higher combo, but the danger rate is much higher, because all it's going to take is one of those stupid raptors just to jump out from like a corner, jungle area and get you. Where these things can't get you. Or I mean, if they can, you got to be pretty darn slow for these things to get you if they do.
Right. Yeah, I'd say speaking of set pieces, another one that I vastly enjoyed was there's 2 of them really. It's the on-rail shooter scenes.
Yeah.
Where you're going to the energy island for the first time and there's just water monsters chasing after you, the whole way and whatnot. That was super fun. And then and this is a direct replication of what we were talking about in the Resident Evil 5 episode of just like, why didn't they use like rhinoceroses and blah 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 instead of just black dudes on motorcycles chasing after you, like, because they do that in this game, with the triceratops section and whatnot, and I was just like, hell yeah. Like they know what's up,
Yeah, exactly. Like the on rails parts are really kind of cool in this one. Those are actually, sounds weird, that triceratops part I think is actually one of the harder parts of the game, because a lot of times it's like if you just kind of miss just a little bit, it's like, next thing you know, your health's getting down and you're like, oh no. And that's mostly always those parts in video games where it's like, okay, I did totally fine with the normal gameplay, you threw this curveball at me, and if I die here I'm gonna be so pissed.
Yep. At least the couple of times that I did die. So one was the tank section, the other one was, now remembering, was that triceratops section. The game actually has a very good checkpoint system, at least in the couple times that I died, because
now, did you use a resurrection pack, or did you
well, res pack, yeah,
because I think the resurrection pack just takes you right back to right where the scene starts, in a sense.
Right. So if it didn't, then it would take you back to your last save, I would assume.
I believe so. I have never died that many times in Dino Crisis 2 to know what happens.
That's what I'm saying. It's hard. It's hard to die in that game, but yeah.
Because I remember the one part, this part got me a couple times, is when you do the second, or the second, I guess it's the final battle, the second Giganosaurus battle of Dylan, you got to cross that stupid little bridge right there. Sometimes it's just because you were just like a fraction away from it, and if you're just off by 1 bit, he knocks that bridge out and you just fall off there.
Yep.
That part was one of those ones where it's just about like twice I kept dying right there. I was like, God damn it, I couldn't cross there. And actually, another part that's kind of a tough one too, and it's tough on like probably any of the modes, is there's the part with Dylan where you got to protect Paula, which we can get the story in a second, how convoluted that kind of gets. But there's a classic escort mission back in like the early days when this was a new idea to have an escort mission. They weren't just radically there. And by about the PS2 era, people kind of said no more of the, or by about PS3 era, escort missions kind of started to fade away. But here you got to escort her across, and of course you got all those whatever the stupid little dinosaurs are that are not Dilophosaurus, they are the Oviraptors or whatever.
Yeah,
they're a little bit different, but they really just feel like they're like Dilophosaurus. So they're slightly different, but and they're jumping out and they're attacking her and so on like that. It kind of reminds me of that scene that's in Metal Gear Solid 3 where you got to escort what's her name across the jungle, and of course there's all these stupid guys coming out all of a sudden and whatnot. But here it's there, and if you kind of, if you like the anti-tank rifle works pretty decently, but sometimes Dylan will do that thing where he locks on to the one that's completely on the other side of the map.
Yep.
Okay, that's mostly the thing that would get me every once in a while in the game is you would go to shoot. It didn't even happen just by not like in the escort mission part, but there's other parts where there's a raptor coming right at you. He turns and aims at the one that's coming the other direction. Oh, no, not that one.
Yep. Yeah, it's a downfall
what makes
of
me
auto
so
aim
pissed
for sure.
is the combo break. I don't know what it is. Like, if there wasn't that combo system, I don't think I'd be nearly as angry. But when the fact that you go, there goes my perfect score for the room.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, no, yeah, just to touch on that side of the combat model, auto aim is fantastic majority of the time, but yes, I very much agree with you where even if you have two mobs right in front of you, you're aiming at the one and you take it out or whatever, and you're still just holding the button. You just try to rotate a little bit or whatever, to fire your next shot at the next mob that's standing right next to it. Dylan is still like locked onto the dead mob, at that point or whatever. So I'm missing shots. So that's happened to me multiple times. The other one that's happened to me is exactly what you said. You have a mob running directly at you. You're not touching anything at this point, but you hit L1, to like auto aim to that thing. And yeah, he targets something 300 miles away. And it's like, what are you doing?
There's one running straight at you, That's what makes Regina's submachine guns kind of like the best, is because it gives you two things to aim at. So it kind of takes some effort for like a raptor to hit Regina with those. She pretty much, it has to be one of those raptors that just jumps out of the side and just is going to get you no matter what. Yeah. But like because you got the two submachine guns, you can just aim at one, aim at the other, and then she'll switch aims right when one dies. So that makes it really nice.
Yep. Yeah. So story wise. Oh, man. This is I am struggling to grasp like what exactly is happening in this game. It's a lot of time travel-y multiverse style shit,
but, they make it way more complicated than it probably needed to be. I don't this is just definitely where it gets very Japanese. Somebody thought they had the greatest idea, you know what I mean? They're like, oh, wait a second, wait till you hear this one. Right. It's like, okay, so whatever, I think they start off in like 2010. It's like they're in 2010, but then they think they're time traveling into the past, but they actually go 3 million years or something goofy into the future, where the things it's pretty much just 2010, whatever this city is that's been traveled there, but nobody, like everybody kind of died because at the same time they bring these dinosaurs from the Cretaceous period back because I think they explain it. It's so weird, but they explain it like we've screwed up back in the past that destroyed the evolution of man. So we got to pull these dinosaurs out, which we're calling the Noah's Ark Project. We're going to just like hang out with them for a bit. They'll be okay. They'll be on an island. You know what I mean? We'll be harmonious and whatnot. And then once everything's fixed and we got the timelines back in order, we're going to transfer the dinosaurs back. It's going to all work out. Don't worry about it and so on like that. But instead, because we brought the dinosaurs here with us to this town on the island in the future, the dinosaurs killed everybody, so it didn't really work out. And now there's just a couple of these, kids that we had in these test tube things that really reminds me of like Planet of the Apes, because they can barely speak anymore. They're like, well, we put them in dinosaur cryo chamber things because the human dinosaur close enough. Well, they lost the ability to talk because of this, but for some reason they now have this weird like Princess Mononoke connection to the dinosaurs, and they want to protect them. So yeah, here's all this weird. Yeah, the story's one of those ones like it's not like it's uninteresting or anything like that. It's just like one of those ones. It's like there's a lot to take in, which I don't know. It reminds me like give this thing one more pass, and you probably could streamline this story just like you streamlined the gameplay. But instead, somebody felt like, you know what, we streamlined the gameplay so much, make that story as complicated as possible.
Oh yeah. It is all kinds of wacky, man. Like. Because by the end of the game, it's like, Dylan is talking to his future self, like in a hologram at one point. He's the random girl that Spencer's mentioned a handful of times that just kind of shows up, or whatever. Regina takes her into custody at one point, and then she disappears and then she comes back, and then just like that's your fucking daughter, like you're playing as Dylan, but you're talking to your future self's hologram about your daughter and how you need to save your daughter, but she's your same age now, and and it's just like what the fuck is going on? Like, I was so vastly confused by the end of all that. But what I do know is that Regina steps into a time portal at the very, very end of the game with this disc thing, and basically it goes, "I'll save you one day, Dylan." And then Dylan, everything blows up and dies, and she disappears back into the past, and then I understand they didn't do anything with it.
Hard cut the credits.
It's like okay.
Yeah, it really leaves you off on like this Empire Strikes Back like ending.
Mm-hmm.
It's like almost if Return of the Jedi never came out.
Yeah.
It just stops at Empire. You're like, what's gonna happen next? You left me off of all these things here. Gina had to do this time travel thing, and then it's like they go to the third one, and I've sadly never played all the way through Dino Crisis 3. I have it actually on Xbox,
Really?
like a real copy and everything. And I remember when I got it, I was like, you know what? I'll go with the sci-fi dinosaur thing. That doesn't bother me. The downfall, I remember just when I was trying it out, and I almost want to give it another college. I've literally gave it 2 college tries in my life, but a third college try. It just doesn't play very good. It has a lot of these similar issues that this is actually kind of relevant to what just came out like literally 2 days ago, but is it had the same problem that this game here, Tomb Raider Angel of Darkness, had on PS2 and even PC, is that they decided to jack with the controls that were totally fine for the last previous games, and the controls are just kind of messed up. And the nice thing is that Angel of Darkness finally got that remaster, and they fixed. Well, you can just manually fix the controls and pretty much make them play like Tomb Raider 1 through 5. Then the game plays totally fine. You know, it's got a couple weird things because that game was trying to be too many things at once. It was Tomb Raider, but then they're like, hey, let's try some Metal Gear Solid. Hey, let's try some Shenmue in here and everything like that. Let's just throw these other games are popular, but that was like how Dino Crisis 3 was. I remember I had the hardest time getting behind the controls because I want to still say it plays kind of like Code Veronica with, camera angles. It's all in 3D, but like and stuff like that. But they took away the tank controls, and tank controls, or when you try to play a game that doesn't have tank controls but it still has camera angles, it's like really jacked up.
Yeah.
And then it's still got sort of the action element, but it doesn't have like the fun factor that Dino Crisis 2 does. So it's a weird mix match. I would love to give it a go one of these days because I think it does have files in there that explain some stuff of Regina.
No, sure.
So, like, I think there's a little bit there. I don't think there's anything. It's not like Regina appears in cutscenes or anything like that.
Oh, yeah.
Really, it should have just been Regina was... I think that would have been kind of an interesting one. It's like, all of a sudden, Regina, she goes in that time vortex, and it just threw... It's like, oh, she's actually now, the year 2500 or whatever in the future.
Right.
And she's on a space colony. It's like, now how does she get back out of this to go save Dylan? Yeah, like, that would have been kind of cool, but... Yeah, they just decided to... You know what they probably was? It was Capcom. They're like, let's use Dino Crisis as our experiment again. Halo's popular.
Right. How do we get sci-fi into our game? Yeah, no. But I think yet again, I mean, like through all of these, episodes that we've talked about Dino Crisis, like I think yet again, it's like a remake I think could add a whole lot. They could complete, and not even like a remake, like I mentioned last episode. I'd really like to see just a reimagination of this, where you could make it a trilogy. Of course, you can make it a really long game for all that matters, and combine the things together or whatever. But I think the gameplay of Dino Crisis 2, I think was a cool change up from the original game. I'd like to see more like consistency throughout its plot and narrative, driven off of what the first game was and how that was designed. So in terms of a remake is what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
But the core concepts and ideas and like narrative basis of Dino Crisis 2, even though I can barely wrap my head around it, there is some cool stuff there because it left me wanting more, by the end of it. By the end of that cutscene where Regina steps through the time portal and then, hard cutscenes or whatever, I remember texting you going like, do they touch on this in Dino Crisis 3? Because like I need to know what happened, you know. So it was interesting enough, you know. So I think a reimagination of that plot and narrative, I think, would be really cool, if they were able to do it right, you know.
Yeah.
So
Well, you know what's the way I sort of look at it is I take the Resident Evil 2 and 3 remakes and look at both those games and go, that's Dino Crisis 1 and 2 right there. So you do 2, or you do Dino Crisis 1 as similar style as Resident Evil 2, that remake. You kind of give it the very survival horror, you know what I mean? You'd add all the elements in there where it's the classic game, but it's still different at the same time.
Yeah.
And then just like 3, because 3 was sort of that same way too. It's like, it almost was like, okay, it's like 3, but it's a little bit more action oriented. It's a little bit more streamlined. It makes for tons of great replayability. I feel like that's what you could almost do with 2, is kind of give it maybe a hybrid where it's maybe you could pull back the action elements just a little bit and put a little bit more survival horror in there, but still keep it streamlined and still keep it kind of that action oriented where you're like, oh, I want to play this game over and over and over again and have the unlockables and all kinds of stuff. Because that was why I love the Resident Evil 3 remake. You know, like I remember when that one came out, like it's like played the living daylights out of that because I thought it was perfect. It really reminded me a lot of Dino Crisis 2 in a sense, like where like you just kept unlocking things, you kept wanting to keep playing it. It was streamlined enough that you never got stuck too much. It was like, you know, there was still enough little puzzles and so on that didn't make you feel dumbed down or holding your hand like an Uncharted game where you're like, okay, now I felt like dumber because of this puzzle. You know what I mean? Like one of those ones where I think when I look at those two games, I'm like, that's Dino Crisis 1 and 2. Just do that, you know, and I think that would be really sweet.
I can fully agree. And then what you could do even past that is like, if they wanted to complete that story, go create Dino Crisis 3, like the proper 3, you know, and just like make a whole new IP, you know, and run with it that way. Then you could even like, you know, from there, I mean, like that opens up the door to so many possibilities within that realm, you know, of what Dino Crisis is. Then you can have your experimental, you know, sci-fi version of the game and whatnot. Just get it into RE Engine. That's all I want at this point, you know, is like I want this same experience but just in RE Engine, you know. But can we talk about real quick, because this one, in terms of like over the top action surprises in this game, you didn't tell me that there's a Hammer of Dawn in this game, dog. By the end of the experience, you know, so you fight, you know, big baddie T-Rex that we shoot in the head at the start of the game with the eyeball and blah blah blah. But then at the end of the game, it's just like big Giganosaurus, whatever the hell it is. It's 3 times the size of that T-Rex. It's already 5 times the size of Regina, you know, and you're looking up at this thing and it kills the T-Rex and then it starts chasing you down. There's a whole bunch of like, you know, like set pieces and blah 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 blah. By the end of it though, dude, like you set off a fucking laser that's like in a satellite in the sky, and I'm just like, dude, this is Gears of War. This is Gears of War right here. Like, you know,
this Hammer of Dawn, and it's more violent than Gears of War. Like, okay, you think of Gears of War, you launch the Hammer of Dawn, it's like cool, you know, it took out some locusts and everything, they blew up. This thing just blows a living hole in this Giganosaurus, just leaves this crater mark in there of brutality.
I love it, dude. I loved it. It was so funny. Like, I mean, it's cool. It's just cool, you know. It's just like it totally fits into the sci-fi theme of the game and whatnot too, you know. But like, like how much the if you would have seen the smile on my face during that cutscene, you know, it's just like I'm like, what am I even? Because again, leading up till this point of just like how crazy the storyline is, you know, and how crazy like, you know, the over the top action of like the last hour of that game is, you know, to that, you know, I was just like 11 out of 10. This game's amazing.
Well, that's the thing. Is just like you walk away from this game, and it's like, how could you not walk away with you being like, isn't that about the most fun you've ever had in a video game? Practically, like very few other games out there have ever got to this level of like awesomeness. You know, it's something that like the other thing I always think about when I play this too is I always go, what would this have been like, you know, because this game's so obviously it's literally like two months away from PS2 coming out, so it's the total in run of PlayStation. But I always kind of wondered, like, just imagine this game, like if they kind of took, like, I picture you take like Resident Evil 3's Mercenaries mode, where, you know, you got Carlos and the whole gang there and whatnot. But you made, like, say if you just took that and you made that like an entire like game, like that was kind of what it was, like it's mercenaries mode, but you have the Resident Evilness. So instead, you're going around cleaning up Raccoon City, blasting out like that'd be almost kind of cool. It's like you're literally there being like a real cleanup crew, killing lickers, killing hunters, killing zombies,
Right.
all that kind of stuff,
Right.
racking up points. You go back to like you can just even have like some kind of like since you are like the mercenaries for Umbrella or whatnot, you can have like a kind of almost Metal Gear Solid like
Right.
5 thing where like you go back to the helicopter, you got all your upgrades and all that stuff there. You transfer whatever you got. Like I always felt like that would have been so cool to see this same gameplay implemented into Resident Evil.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. No, I fully agree. I fully agree. And and again, like it has some plot twists and some characters that are interesting enough to keep you engaged along the ride. Like it doesn't need to be, doesn't need to be like Death Stranding levels of voice acting and blah blah blah. There's a lot of like lines that just fall super dead and flat in this game, but they're hilarious. Like they're so good. No, I love it. I love it.
Yeah, well, because it's like there's like the guy with the cowboy hat. I was trying to remember what the heck that dude's name was, but there's that guy. He's like the buff guy with the cowboy hat. He's
We'll
wearing the
save you,
vest.
bro.
We'll save you, bro.
My God, dude. Yeah,
Yeah, like David and whatnot. Like he almost reminds me like he could have fit in with like he's like a proto Gears of War kind of guy.
Yeah.
He's just
That was one section. So there's a section where you're playing as Dylan, and he's like turning a valve or something. Is he turning on water or something? I forgot what he's doing. You have to like protect him. Like I hated that section. That part sucked. But
well, that part because you had to protect him from the raptors, and you're just blasting like this cannon down at him and whatnot. And I kind of realized the one thing I noticed is like, don't worry about the raptor on the top because that was the one that would kind of distract you. Be like, no, because that raptor on the top actually has to jump down first before he can actually do anything. So if you just focused on the bottom and the right raptors, and then when the one at the top jumped down, then you shoot him.
Yeah.
But he's got that part where he's like, yo, I'll save you, bro, and he like literally takes like a bullet or he takes the T-Rex bite for Dylan.
And Regina's just standing there, just watching it all happen. Just like, oh, just slowly backing up. Like,
well, that's what I love about Regina is she just kind of has that attitude where like she's kind of just like she doesn't really care. She like even in the first game, like she sees dead bodies, she's like, oh, that's what a fucking pathetic death. Like, and even there's a part too where like that guy's like he's like, yo, let the men handle this, and she's
right?
Yeah, whatever, go for it.
Yeah, go.
See what happens. Yeah, sure. you're gonna die
2 minutes later. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, like, I guess just other things to touch on real quick. So some of the backtracking sense of it is like, very early on, you run into like a spore field where you have like this like poisoned out area or whatever, and it's just like blatantly obvious like you need an item to be able to progress through it or whatever. So you get the gas mask like super later on in the game that forces you to go back to the island. You're able to access a whole brand new section which brings you into end game. The whole nuclear silo thing and whatnot, which that's another interesting plot thing. So you got Giganosaurus running around or whatever, turning on the nuclear silos and stuff. Like, what is going on during that whole section? Because like, and I mean, like, he's rampaging, I guess, like, but like he arms that fucking bomb twice, and it's like, why?
Just gonna blow everything up, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, it just keeps happening.
But again, just it's the silliness of the writing, that I just find just so enjoyable. I thought it was really funny. So
yeah. It's just that thing where, it's written like it's a over the top kind of anime sort of feel and everything. But that is kind of the cool thing. There is a lot of like different like areas and just everything about it. It just has a good look and just constant change up that makes everything feel kind of fresh each time you have it there. And you don't milk too many areas other than the jungle. You really don't milk any of them for too long. Like you're kind of there just enough to be like, oh, this is cool, and it's nicely detailed and there's all the good descriptions and they got good notes and memos throughout the way that really is kind of what explains a lot of the extra backstory stuff because technically once again everybody's dead here. You don't find think you find any survivors the whole time, other than the people from the future that shoot those little like disc guns out.
Yeah, yeah,
And whatnot.
yeah.
They remind me like those '90s like Nerf ones where like you just like load that big old cart of like discs and like choo 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 choo.
Yeah, yeah. Exactly,
That's literally what it looks like they're shooting at you, you know. And then every single time everybody's doing like their cool like whoa, dodge roll, yeah. Like how
Well,
are they shooting
it's
at
back
us?
when mocap was like, it's very obvious, like that's like the rudimentary style of like mocap, of that era or whatever, because of like even just scenes of like Dylan and Regina just like running into a room, and like you can tell that, like the way that they mocapped it, like they're physically in the space somewhere, and like there's objects around them or whatever, like in their realm, and how they mix that into the game, I found super interesting, so, but just seeing that kind of technology over time, because like I mentioned Death Stranding earlier, like Death Stranding has like some of, in my opinion, probably some of like the best like facial and like body rendering like technology out there. And it's cool to see like the infancy of things like that, when games turned into 3D for the first time and whatnot. And granted, this particular game's a bit deeper into the cycle of that, but again, just to see the wireframeness of it, and especially in cutscenes, it's super fun.
Yeah, well, because you could kind of see that, because like in those earlier like ones, like Resident Evil 1 and even Tomb Raider, the original one, they literally manually animated all their motions and stuff.
Exactly.
Which is pretty sweet when you think about it like that, for like how fluid those games kind of, I mean, for what they are, and the fact that it's like, yeah, somebody just manually did that. They didn't.
Right.
There wasn't that other technology there yet, or if it was, it's not. Nobody could like you weren't going to buy that for your video game yet. Where by this point they're starting to get to that very cinematic era, where yeah, you do have that. I mean, really, just even the cutscenes itself. There's only like 3 or 4, like of like the nice pre-rendered ones. But this is that era where like you had to have those sweet cutscenes in your games. And, and I remember that was the thing too. Is like when you'd play a PlayStation 1 game, and I remember when you'd see those cutscenes, that was what you're like, that's what video games are going to look like soon.
Right.
You saw the pre-rendered cutscenes. You're like, and I remember because that was sort of like when you saw PS2. If you kind of compare side by side, it's like, of course, the PS1's cutscenes, disincluding the compression, are still kind of slightly better. But PS2 was kind of like, oh, it almost feels like that looks like the cutscenes of PS1.
Right. Yeah. And even in today's realm, like looking at something like a pre-rendered, like cutscene in a current age game or whatever, I don't know how much better they can really get at this point, like unless there's certain titles that are doing things within photorealism that I find very, very interesting. There's a very particular game called Body Cam, that's an actual video game, and like and I'm not even talking cutscenes. I'm just like talking just like straight up gameplay. If you have an opportunity, look up Body Cam, because it basically looks like someone has a camera strapped to their chest, like is like how realistic that game looks. So again, just like it's so much fun going back and being able to play like older titles and appreciate them for what they are and how they've evolved up until, new age, into today's realm. So, but again, like I said, in DC2, I noticed the mocap stuff quite a bit, and like how fluid it was, because, it's just of that era, super cool.
Yeah.
So,
that's the thing, is it's really dialed in. As I said, you pretty much have, in a sense, Capcom firing on all cylinders for their PSX run. Like this really is like, it goes. I guess it's the last major Capcom game to come out for PlayStation.
Yeah.
Because really, like the next thing. Well, I think this almost comes out at the same time as. Actually, I think this comes out before. I almost want to say Code Veronica comes out before this.
Yeah.
Because I want to say that game, it's kind of an early release Dreamcast game, which means if this game came out at the end of 2000, I want to say Code Veronica comes out in like March or something like that.
Really interesting.
Because I remember getting it like, Dreamcast comes out in '99, like November for the US release, and then I want to say it was like, just a couple months later, Code Veronica came out. So.
Interesting.
So it's weird to think of Code Veronica being, an earlier game than this, but it almost kind of makes sense though, because I will say if you disinclude the graphics, this game does feel way more advanced than Code Veronica in a sense.
Yeah. Yep.
Obviously the Dreamcast graphics are going to add a little bit more there, but just the fluidness and the way it plays and everything like that, Code Veronica almost seems a little bit more retro.
I'm actually, thinking about it now, I am actually very surprised that this did not get either a Dreamcast or a PS2. You know, were there very many in any game? Doesn't need to be Capcom or survival horror genre or anything. Like, were any games really cross-releasing back then in terms of PS1 into PS2?
Yeah, there was, because there's some of those games that like they literally would come out on all three. They would come out on PlayStation, Dreamcast, and N64. You know, I could point out some games like this one. I don't know why this sticks out, but Vigilante 8 that comes out on all three of the systems.
Well, I guess for more, what I'm asking is PS1 to PS2. Like, cut Dreamcast out of the picture for this. Like, were there cross releases between PS1 and PS2?
No, I don't think so, because we were kind of talking about that earlier in the podcast, and I cannot think of one. I can think of a lot of games, of course, because Dreamcast, that was the thing. Dreamcast just had a lot of N64 and PlayStation 1 games, in a sense, enhanced versions.
Right.
That was what made up the bulk of its like initial library. But I don't think there's...
Because I don't recall that really happening until like the PS2 into the PS3 or the Xbox into the 360 era. Like, I remember cross releases on those. Can't think of one off the top of my head.
I can think of, there's ones. I'm gonna go with another. Sounds weird. I keep having these Tomb Raider fucking ones, but Tomb Raider Anniversary came out on both PS2 and PS3 and 360. You know, like it was kind of like a mixed match one there.
Yeah.
There's some of those ones like that. I think even Tomb Raider Underworld did as well too.
Interesting.
PlayStation didn't have that thing where you know, once again, I'm using Dreamcast as kind of the example, because Dreamcast is in that kind of, it's that weird in between system, but it pretty much, you would say it's more PS2 than it is anything else. But it has a lot of like, here's a sort of an updated version of a PlayStation 1 game. And I remember back in the day, you'd read the reviews in magazines, and they would actually get kind of docked because of those kind of games, which is funny, because in the long run, I think that's actually cool, because it's like, because I remember the Dino Crisis 1 I remember the review, like when I read about it, they're like, yeah, it's okay, it's Dino Crisis 1, which is cool, but it's not that much better looking on Dreamcast. Like, so they gave it less points because of that. Like, they're expecting it to be a little bit more enhanced. But ironically, if you went to play it nowadays, you'd be like, yeah, play the Dreamcast version. It's going to be much better than the PlayStation 1 one, you know? And there's a lot of those games like that too. It's like, I mean, I guess back in the day, if you were double dipping, it's not that much. But if you have the choice, why not have the version that's literally going to be a little bit higher resolution, you know?
Right.
And have maybe a couple more features.
Yeah, super interesting. Yeah, Capcom was going through a lot of changes during this whole time period, based off all the titles that you just rattled off, plus what I know about them, you know, like, you know, so yeah, pretty interesting. Well,
you want to know what's the other interesting one, though, is that PC version was released in 2002, so it was 2 years later that the PC version came out. So that's probably why that PC one's kind of such an oddity until now, because, you think about it, by the time that comes out, well, now you literally have Xbox, you got PlayStation 2, and you have GameCube, so there's a lot of stuff going on, and that's going to make Dino Crisis 2 seem a little bit old by 2002 standards, you know what I mean? Like, if you get on PC.
Right. Yeah, that's correct. It's interesting. Yeah.
So yeah, there is some kind of weird things like that, but that's such a late release too, to be like, I could see a couple months later, but to be like, 2 years later, here you go.
Right.
You know,
well, I just I wonder like how prevalent like PC really was at that time period, at least for these style games, you know, like, I mean, obviously the PC ports exist, but I would imagine that majority of the player base was probably on PlayStation, you know? So.
I think so, because I think a lot of times, I think just the PC was just always kind of an easy port, so they eventually just got around to doing it, you know? And, you know, there still always was those like PC-only players back in the day, you know? It's not like, I know nowadays it seems like that's, you know, the PC is so much more common, but to have people be like, oh, that's my main system. But, you know, back in the day, there was some people that, like, they literally had to hang out and wait for it. But once again, just like the Dreamcast argument I kind of have, it's like, yeah, if you kind of generally have the PC version, you're getting a much better variation of the game. That's why I love buying PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2 era games and getting the PC versions of them. Right. Because it really feels like you just literally got a remastered version of it. You're like, holy crap, it looks so much better. It's got more settings I can kind of dick around with. And especially when you got a newer computer where you could just crank everything up to like the highest quality. You're like, cool, you know? Because back in the day, you probably wouldn't be able to do that. You'd be like, oh, my Windows XP can't handle this PS2 era game. So I'm probably playing it on medium settings. But nowadays, you're like, yeah, crank that up. You know? And I think that's one of the things that is really, because just the one thing about the PC games is always it's always how crystal clear they are. That's the biggest takeaway that like makes it different from like the console counterparts.
Oh yeah,
It's the same thing of all those Resident Evil ones, of course the Dino Crisis. You throw in like the Tomb Raider ones, you throw in any of those PS2 era games. It's like they're just it's just you can see for days in them and stuff like that. Like they're just not. And I always kind of wonder because I always would love to kind of go back in time and be like, if I booted this up on a Windows like 98, what would that would I still have that, or is that just like looking at it now because you can play it with a pretty darn powerful computer? But I feel like even if you're playing Dino Crisis 2, that probably would run pretty darn smooth on a Windows 98, no problem whatsoever.
Yeah, I can imagine. And thank God GOG is who they are. Because when we played DC1 and we were talking about DC2, I'm like, one day I will purchase that game somehow, some way. Even more so now. I have it on GOG. I have access to it at any given time I want. I can play it on my Steam Deck. I can play it on the go. Like stuff like that. Great, fine, dandy, fantastic. Bro, I'm willing to drop money on this title to have a physical Black Label. Like I want it. Like I would love to have this in my library. Because leading up to this point, I had no idea. I had no idea that it would be this good. Yeah,
it'd be this good. Well, and that's the thing too. It's one of those ones I've always wanted to buy this too myself because I remember I rented it when it first came out. Then I borrowed it from somebody at school. And I never owned it myself. And it's one of those things that, like, you kind of kick yourself for not buying it because, at one point the game, was only $30 used. At one point, then next thing, probably at one point it was only $10 used. Let's be honest. There probably was a period where it was worth nothing.
Right.
And now it's at the point where it's over $100+. I don't know if the GOG thing made it kind of spike a little bit, but
I because I was targeting it, so most of the time I was seeing like a decent copy of it, non-crack case, full complete in box, like not pristine, but decent. Yeah. Roughly about $110. I'm actually going to look it up here real quick just to see what current market is.
Well, I kind of looked at it like just the other day, just out of curiosity when we were talking about it, and they're about 150 give or take for a good copy.
Okay, so they've gone up.
So, and I think I'm pretty sure the GOG thing probably spiked it a bit because there's been sort of a resurgence in Dino Crisis just recently that was never. It's weird because Dino Crisis 2 never really had this big resurgence, but I think because it was tied to that GOG thing that it kind of had this like lift off again. But because I would dump $100 on the PlayStation copy for a good one. I that wouldn't bother. In a sense, I hate to sort of say it, like I look at it this way: that technically is the exact same price you would have paid for it brand new back in the day, but with inflation. Because
exactly.
I always feel like from 2000 to now, like literally inflation is almost double. You know what I mean? If back in the day, like if you had a minimum wage job in California, you were making, when Dino Crisis came out, you were making like $6.50 an hour or something like that. So now if a minimum wage job's like $18 an hour, shit, that's 3 times as much. So by all means, it's a bargain. And the fact that the game's technically better than almost any game you could buy nowadays.
Right. Exactly.
That's sometimes how I look at it when I go to buy old games. I go, is this game better than something you would go spend $70 on right now, brand new?
Right.
And by inflation costs, you're not losing any money. You're paying the exact same thing you would have.
Right.
Nothing's changed. It seems expensive when you look at it, but if you break it down, it's like, oh no, you're actually kind of still getting a hell of a deal.
Yeah. Because what I'm seeing right now, it's like it's average, like you said, about 150. I think it's worth it. Just to have it up on the shelf, and be able to play it at any time. I think the the alternative though would be absolutely pick this up on GOG. I think Dino Crisis 1 and 2 combined is like $17 as a bundle pack, or you can buy them individually for $10 a piece or whatever if you just want one or the other. But honestly, like for $17, just pick up both.
Yeah, it's a hell of a deal. That's why I didn't even question it. You know what I mean? And I mean it'll probably go on sale in the long run for probably half that price.
Oh, sure. Yeah,
it's one of those ones. Those games are so good that I'm like, I don't care. I'll take that right away. Like it's amazing to have, and the PC versions are really sweet. Like they probably are the definitive way to play it for sure. Other than the fact that I'm just having that weird thing where I feel like my extinction points don't roll over on the new playthrough. But I can't remember exactly. It's been a moment, but you can still buy it on the PS3. Was the PS3 store still up, or did that finally close? I can't remember.
I think that's been done for a while now.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure.
It was, because I remember I went on there. It felt like it wasn't that long ago, but maybe it was a little bit long ago. I remember I picked up like 2 other games. I'm like, cool, and then I never played them. But I was like, at least I have them on there. But I know I have Dino Crisis 2 on my PS3 still.
Yeah, heck yeah.
PSP as well because of that. But so it's like I always had it multiple times on like different digital versions throughout, whatnot.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that is the way to go. Or, worst case, you could always emulate it, and with DuckStation, you can kind of crank up the resolution, and it does look pretty slick.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, I think what I'm enjoying right now is the fact that I'm able to play it natively on the Steam Deck with very minimal configuration. Like it just works. So
yeah,
it's very cool.
Well, that was the one thing I was kind of hoping. Just speaking of also, is because GOG and Amazon have been playing so nicely together that the cool feature's been is that a few of the games. Literally, if you have them on your GOG library, you can and as long as you have just a regular Amazon Prime account, you can literally just stream those games on your phone.
That is wonderful.
On the
awesome.
So like a lot of times it's cool. It's like, 'cause there's a lot of games they keep appearing. They're only doing that thing where they drop like 5 new ones every week or every other week. But like perfect example is that Tomb Raider remaster. Like I bought the original one. I bought the original one on Nintendo, and then when I saw that like I could play it on Luna if I bought it on GOG, I'm like, well, give me that version. So I bought the new one that way, and it's like it's cool because then it's like I can play it on the go. I can pull my phone out, hook my Bluetooth controller up, and there we go.
Yeah.
And I was really hoping like maybe they'll put Dino Crisis on there. You never know. Same with the Resident Evil ones, because I think that's really going to be Luna's, I think, big saving grace is if they can get that really. If you could just almost have the majority of your GOG library being like, yeah, you can just stream them whenever you want on Luna.
That's
that would be the killer app right there. I'd be like, oh, that's badass, because the Luna thing streams better than Game Pass even. So it's like,
yeah, you've mentioned that a few times.
But it just needs that like a little bit more. And the GOG thing's one of the coolest things. As I said, they only have like maybe 100 games from there, but it's when it does work, it's like, oh, it's so cool just to be able to have that extra bonus feature.
Oh, that was the other thing I wanted to ask. Doesn't have to do with Dino Crisis, it has to do with GOG. Did we find out if Alone in the Dark's in there?
No, I think it's only in Steam. Or you could get it on, if you have it, you can also play it on PlayStation. They put it on PS5.
Oh, okay.
So which I don't know, I've been tossing that one up because we've been talking. That was the thing, is we talked about playing Alone in the Dark, and then the Dino Crisis 2 came out right then. It's like, hold the phone, Alone in the Dark. I know I wanted to go back and give you another play, the new Nightmare one, but then it was like, Dino Crisis 2 kind of came out, but and that's what I've been tossing up. What version do I play? Do I play the PlayStation? I played on PS5, but then I'm playing the PS1 version. The only bonus is then you kind of get some of those, like, I can rewind it if I kind of screw up in a part.
Right.
I can make some save states if I get kind of like lazy and be like, I just don't want to go find another save point right now. I can just, call it a night right here. But then I could play it on Steam where you get the PC version. It's a little bit more, it's going to be a little bit crystal clear looking. Because that's another game that came out on the Dreamcast as well, and that's also a good version, which I do have that. If I want to get really ballsy, I could go pull out my Dreamcast and play it on there.
Hell yeah.
Which would probably be the ultimate way to go, but I don't know. I've been tossing around, and I'm not too sure which one I want to play.
It is on GOG, by the way, so you know.
Oh, is it? Well,
yeah. I just all these old games, man. Like I've had a bad experience with old games on Steam because they're not. Steam doesn't do anything about it. Whatever the developer publisher puts on Steam is the version you get, and then you have to like mod it from there if it doesn't work and blah blah blah. Like GOG just tends to work out of the box in my experience. So
yep. Well, I have learned that too, because a perfect example is Alone in the Dark: The New Nightmare. When I first bought it like 5 years ago or whatever, one of those games that did not work whatsoever on Steam. It works now, but that makes me kind of iffy. It's like, okay, cool, it boots up, I can play. Like, how long can I play before it craps out? That's why that's my fear, because you had to go in there. That was like that one where it's like, oh, let's go on there, find some nice fella in the community section that somehow has put a patch together. I don't even know him, but I'm gonna assume he's done the Lord's work.
Exactly.
Get us going here. So
just don't infect my computer with that zip file, please.
I'm going here, but. Well, that's kind of cool that it's on there. I would almost maybe buy that game again. As I said, I'm not too sure what version, but yeah, that'll probably be what we play next. Is Alone in the Dark: The New Nightmare, because we keep talking about that. So there. But any last thoughts on Dino Crisis 2 and all its glory? And
I know that this episode was kind of a mishmash, ramble about how cool this game is. Like, again, if you've played DC1 and enjoyed DC1. you're gonna go in with a different mindset in this game, but it's a buy. It's a must buy. It's a must play. I am mad at myself that my younger self never actually grabbed that copy of DC2 off the shelf, because I've seen it a million times. I was just like, like just didn't think about it, So no, absolutely, I loved it. I loved it. I thought it's an amazing game. Very glad I have it now at my disposal.
Yeah, it's like the only people that I think that would maybe not care for it a whole lot is if you really like Dino Crisis 1 for everything that it was, and you were very hardcore into like the most traditional aspects of survival horror. I could see where this one could kind of throw you a curveball at first and be like kind of hard to wrap around, but you can't deny the fun that will be had in there. I feel almost, if you say that you don't like Dino Crisis 2, it's just like telling me you don't like fun. You know, it might not be. I get it. If Dino Crisis 1, you like, I like the kind of the atmosphere a little bit more. I like the traditionalness. I 100% get that. But yeah, like Dino Crisis 2 is just full of fun. Some of the best gameplay, I think, in almost any game era, game period, whatever. It's that one that, I kid you not, if I thought about, like, if I want the most fun experience that I can have in that classic survival horror look and feel, I would literally pull out Dino Crisis 2. It's like it's like my ultimate go-to. I've put so many rounds into it throughout the years, and it always holds up. It's always fun. And it's just one of those ones. It gives me all like the things I love about survival horror, but like once again, streamlined, a lot of action, a lot of fun, and everything like that. And don't get me wrong, I love Dino Crisis 1 and everything like that, but that's like one of those games where like you play through it and there is some parts that kind of like, oh, God, where's the stupid key card at? Oh, I'm missing that part. It never makes me like, whenever I play it, I'm always like, I'm good for a few years on this one. Like I'll come back again, of course, because I do like the game, but it doesn't make me go like, oh man, I can't wait to play this over again right away. So yeah, I hope that this resurgence with the GOG thing is really letting Capcom know that, like, people still really do dig Dino Crisis, both 1 and 2. Because I feel like 1 has always been pretty well, like, you always hear people, remake 1. Oh, I would like to see more of that. But I felt like this GOG release did kind of give a new light to number 2 for some people that might not have ever, they might have known about it, but they never played it and so on like that. Because it used to be considered like a hidden gem game that like, it felt like only recently has it kind of got like some more popularity. But for the longest time, it was kind of like, it's a very overlooked hidden gem game that, and it was,
I imagine that most players are like me that probably played DC1, like, so in my experience, right? DC1, very cool game, but Resident Evil was better, in my opinion.
Yeah.
DC2, I don't know. Like I didn't like DC1 that much as a child playing it. That has completely reversed as an adult now. But like back then, like it just wasn't in the survival horror like that much with dinosaurs. Like I just thought zombies were cooler. So I feel that probably majority of the player base that has played DC1 probably hasn't played DC2, and if they have, then it was such a shell shock, from the vast changes in genre, like, so I can see why it's probably a less popular title, but absolutely agree with you in the hidden gem sense, because if this GOG thing didn't happen, like I probably wouldn't have ever played it.
Yeah, because really the last main release for it was PS3 and PSP. Because when PlayStation used to have a good virtual console store, it was on there because there was quite a bit of PlayStation 1 games you could get. And but yeah, that was kind of about it. So I think there's been kind of a, like, in a sense, like a 10-year lull where, it hasn't really been easily available and whatnot. But yeah, go check out Dino Crisis 2. If you've never played it before, you're going to be in for experience. And if it's been a long time, you're going to be in for experience. That's just kind of how it is. You'll boot it up and you'll go, oh, I remember why this was so good, So, but yeah. From there, we had the 2 survival horror action games in a row. So, maybe we'll go in a little bit more traditional sense next. Yeah, beyond all that good stuff, I'm Spencer Scott Holmes.
And I am Cameron.
And we'll see you some other time.